Hi, I'm Steve Blame, and welcome to Pop the History Makers, where I sit down with the artists who've not only made great music, but whose work has stood the test of time. And today I'm speaking with someone whose voice is instantly recognizable, whose songs helped shape the sound of the late 80s and 90s British soul rock, and who continues to evolve as an artist, Andrew Roachford. Welcome. It's been a long time.
It has been a long time. Yeah, it's been a lifetime.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think I was there, sort of very much at the beginning of your career. But this podcast also looks at the childhood and the early life, because I feel, I mean, particularly, obviously from my own experience, that we are formed a lot from our childhood, particularly, our experiences in the childhood. So can you tell me a little bit about your early childhood life, what it was like?
My early childhood life. Oh my God, should be lying down for this. I tell you. Uh, Actually, I was really lucky. I was born into a musical family, and that was on my mum's side. So my mum was one of seven, and all of her siblings played music. And I grew up in the family. My mum lived with her brother, that was Uncle Bill, and Uncle Oliver, and they were constantly having musicians around rehearsing in the living room. There was always a piano around. That's a given, since my grandmother deemed it that way. And so I was constantly having jazz musicians around, people playing like stack soul. My Uncle Bill played the saxophone, and Uncle Oliver liked to put on parties with the big speakers, the whole thing. And back in those days, because we're talking late 60s, 70s, uh, they were playing a lots of like Otis Redding, Al Green, Caribbean music, some the old reggae music, which was really inspired by the American soul artists. So that's kind of, and but then I grew up in London, so I also grew up typical South London kid, I guess in most ways, and Radio One was there, so I had that going on as well at the same time. Top of the pops.
I mean, you said your mum lived with your uncle. Was your father absent?
My father was there for a short while, long enough to make me and my brother. My brother was 2 years younger than me, and my father played a bit of drums. And it's an odd story, but he went on tour with another brother of my mum's, and they got to Scandinavia. They got to Sweden. Kind of liked it. The band started doing well there, stayed there, and that was it. Yeah, my father was a bit of a dude, a bit of a dude. You got to bear in mind that those people, they were young. They were young chaps coming off from the Caribbean. And next thing they know, they're on tour in Scandinavia, where, to be honest with you, brown people were quite a novelty. And I think they lost their minds a little bit. And that's kind of the story.
That's interesting because my father was absent both emotionally at first and then physically.
Right.
And I feel that affected me a lot in my life, that a lot of what I've done in my life is sort of trying to find a sense of confirmation from my father. Is that the same with you?
Wow, we're getting kind of deep here. I don't, it's amazing how you can go through your life and not actually really notice yourself that much. You're just doing, and you think this is me. And then as you get older, you start realizing some of the things that made up your character, and often, you're right, they're shaped in your childhood. And I think with me, yeah, I guess there was definitely growing up a bit of a people pleaser in some ways, and you look for approval. I think I had that. It wasn't anything too strong, so it wasn't something that was too. What I'm saying, it wasn't that pronounced, but it was there.
I'll only ask you one more question about your dad then. But Lee John from Imagination, he told me that when he thought that his father really, he didn't want him to be a pop singer, he didn't really respect him, he said. And then when his father died, he found a box of press clippings in his home of all his press clippings. And it was sort of a moment, a revelation moment, that actually his father couldn't express emotion. And, I don't think we're exactly the same generation. I think I'm a little bit older than you. But we come from the parents' generation were parents that really couldn't always show feelings and emotions and really express things.
Yeah, definitely. It was a different time. Even the kind of conversation we're having now and the whole thing about therapy and, that was all frowned upon 50 years ago, or 60 years ago. And so, yeah, it shows that we're evolving as a species, as humans, as in Britain, and, the whole thing about the stiff upper lip thing that they had in the UK 60 odd years ago is now, as old hat. People realize that actually it's a lie in a way, because if you have feelings that you can't express, it can lead to some catastrophic results.
Yeah, absolutely. It can also lead to some drive. I actually think that in some aspects, it's like you gain the drive to achieve something because there's a lack. So you want to feel that lack. Anyhow, I don't want to take you down the route of lying on the couch unless you want to.
Well, I think that like a lot of great artists or art is actually more inspired and driven through the things that maybe aren't as the more painful stuff in our life and the challenges that we've had to overcome, and that drives the art. And I remember I have a friend who actually is a therapist, and he said when he meets artists, he's obviously aware that if you cure every so-called issue they have, they may have problems. Their art may dry out because now they have to find another driver. It's not to say that you can't make great art out of stability and comfortableness and happiness and joy. Of course you can, but it's a shift that you have to sort of consciously make, I think.
Okay, let's get on to the Caribbean aspect, because in Britain there was a very tight community, because it had to be, I presume. So how tight was that community, and what did it feed you with?
That community, I mean, my mum and my dad both from Barbados in the Caribbean. And when you go to the Caribbean, you get that feeling that you're all one family in a sense. I'm not saying that people don't argue and have road rage like they do here, but you all look at each other like your cousins, you've all got that thing in common, and it definitely spilled over to when the Caribbeans moved to the UK. They still had that attitude. Like you see another Caribbean, you have an experience already in common before you've opened your mouth. You make that assumption. So on that level, the community was tight. A lot of people came over to the UK in the early 60s to look for work, and were promised, actually, because England was just getting itself back together after World War II and needed the workforce, as that's always in the main drive for immigration in the first place. And but then what they did is that they moved to the areas that they were allowed to be in, because that was you moved to areas that really no one else wanted to really live in. So you also found yourself in the same parts of town, so to speak, and family sent for family. So you found that the communities were bunched in certain areas in different towns around the UK.
And so, there was this closeness, and I don't know, there's a sort of parallel in a way, because I saw music as an escape. The moment I became a teenager and I realized I was gay, for me, music was like an escape from where I felt I didn't belong to a place where I belonged. What was music for you? Was it also an identity?
You know what? I think that for most people, when I was at school, when you're like 15, 14, 15, music is about where you sit in society. It's got a big part of you're labeling to yourself. If I fit into this group, I belong to this, But because I came from a musical family, I had that as well. I loved my reggae music and all that, but I also had such an eclectic influence. I was classically trained from when I was like a toddler, and my family, being Caribbean, were also into calypso, but that led to Latin music. My uncle was into jazz, which led to blues. So I think some of my mates, my peers, and they all thought I was a bit weird because not only did I love reggae music and the Caribbean music of the time, I liked music from the 50s, from the 40s, I listened to old jazz, and I liked blues, and really distorted guitar stuff. And so I was really not the kind of person that used music as an identity in that way. I was a musician.
Were you a natural at the piano?
Yeah. In a word, I was. I mean, it's so funny because I had music in the family and that piano was sitting in the corner of the room and I never touched it until I got one morning. I was 4 years old and and literally the morning, it was still getting light. It must have been about 4:30 in the morning. For some reason, got up, started playing and woke everyone up. And my mum was just like, oh my God, he's making such a noise. And then she thought, well, if we can get him to make that noise in tune, maybe it'd be better. So how about getting him some lessons? But when I was playing it, I just remember, even though it must have been a racket, I felt like I was having an out of the body experience. Even at 4 years old, something was just happening, which was quite transcendental. It was like, it wasn't just some kid plonking away at piano. I was having a journey of some sort. And I knew from that time that my connection with music wasn't just about music on a shallow level or just about notes or ability, technique to play. There was something more going on. And up to this day, I can't really tell you what it was, but it feels like I was obviously meant to play and it was a calling, and where it's coming from, the music isn't just about, hey, everyone, look at me. Aren't I clever because I can play? It definitely is something that connects people and people feel something for what I'm doing. And it's almost like a telepathic energy. It's above the norm for me.
I think there's also something in it about the vibration, about the tonal quality, about the timbre of a voice and things like that, which express emotions and they connect with us into our emotion as the audience or the listener. And I think I don't know what that does to the artist, because that must be a different experience. So I'll give you an example. So you're on stage in front of an audience. And for me in the audience, watching someone like you, there will be a moment where I suddenly connect quite early on, often, and you connect to the artist and then you're in. Do you know what I mean? For the whole concert. Describe that in your terms as the artist.
Well, in my terms, it's quite an interesting experience because there's a two-way connection going on. You feel connected to the audience emotionally. You can feel them moving and swaying with where the songs are going. You can actually feel them. And I spend a lot of my concerts with my eyes closed, because I'm so in the place and in the zone. But I can feel the audience, and it's not something that happens on the high street every day. But here you are in a room with a bunch of strangers, but you all quite connected, and they're feeding you energy, of course, because they're loving what you're doing, and you're kind of sending that back through what you're doing. And there's this transference, two-way thing happening that feels like nothing else on the planet. There's nothing else that feels like that. It's just quite sublime. It's incredible.
It's also something deep within the body, isn't it? Yeah,
of course. I mean, that's why I always say music, it's you have to feel it, and it's not just what you're playing, it's what you're saying. Science has acknowledged that we're made of sound. We're made of molecules resonating at a certain key, at certain frequencies, which is the same thing as key. And when why do people hear music and want to dance? What is that all about? Obviously, if you look in science, things tend to want to resonate with other things, and it's just the way of the world. It's the way of the universe. And we're just part of that, but we haven't quite realized why we do it yet, you know. But on stage, you know, you can feel that it's talking to people on a very deep level, the music, not just, I don't know if every artist is like that, by the way. Some people, it is just about, you know, look at me on stage and I'm great, and then that's their thing. But for me, I grew up with people like Stevie Wonder, Sam Cooke, Marvin Gaye, who you could feel that it was more than just about a guy or a person playing notes. There was something else going on.
Yeah, and you also mentioned before, you know, artists like Jimi Hendrix, Sly and the Family Stone, and bands that also use a lot of guitar. So where did that sort of interest in the guitar come after the piano, or was it after the piano?
Well, it was after the piano, because obviously I started doing classical on the piano. And it was quite later on where I discovered, because my uncle and my mom used to have vinyl around the house. And there was one album with Jimi Hendrix face on it called Smash Hits. And I think it was recorded at the BBC, and it was like a compilation, him playing his hits live. And I played it, and Hey Joe came on. And again, it took me to this other place. And I was like, what is that? And I could hear the deep emotion, on the edge of the emotion within that guitar, you know. And I was always attracted to quite earthy sounding music, and music that's really emotive and on the edge with the emotion. And so that grabbed me. Of course, I loved all of the, you know, in the 80s, the soul music had got quite about keyboards. It was all keyboard and machines and quite sparkly, you know, Luther Vandross, and it was amazing. I just liked the edge of the blues and the guitar stuff with what I was doing. So I don't know, it's just something that was in me.
You played in bars with your uncle. Your uncle played quite a big role in your musical life, didn't he? So tell me about playing in bars at a really young age and what you learnt about performance and playing, and also what you learnt about life.
These are small questions, you know. I mean, you know, the thing is my uncle, he played in a lot of the bars where the guys played, where they got the works, the jazz guys, was in Soho. And Soho at the time was quite seedy, of course. Soho was like the red light district. And so everything that went with it, often the bars we play in also had a stripper as well. And that was just the nature of Soho at the time. It was really edgy. And so I think the first time I properly saw like a naked woman and people stripping and stuff like that was definitely working with my uncle. And all the guys in the band, they were all a lot older than me. I was actually still at school, so I'm sure the whole thing was a bit illegal, I have to say. But what I learned, you know, my uncle was he was like regimental about music. He was always like, your timing's got to be this, and he didn't let a note slip without telling you off about it. So it gave me that kind of disciplined approach to music, and my timing is very on because of him, because he insisted on it. But also, I kind of had to grow up quite quickly, because I was getting home at like 5 a.m. and then having to go to school. And I couldn't tell my mates what my other life was, because, you know, I was working in bars that I shouldn't be working in. So I think I was, again, a bit different from a lot of my mates, you know, at school.
Was this where your sort of love of performing was rooted?
You know, my love of performing was rooted there, but it was also from watching some of my favorite artists perform. People like James Brown, again, you know, Stevie, I mean, and Little Richard as well. That energy that comes through the music, obviously seeing Michael Jackson, and the Jackson 5 when I was a kid, it just spoke to me, because I got that connection with the music and the performance. It wasn't just, you know, you can be a performer and you can do, I guess you could do musical musical music kind of thing. Whereas for me, it had to come from the music. So the performance had to be inspired by the energy in the music. Had to be real, Yes, my uncle was a big performer. And he was a bit of a flirt as well. He played the saxophone, but he'd be like doing other things with his hands and pointing at the girls. And, he was a bit of a lad, that man. Bless him. Yeah.
Were you writing songs at this stage?
I started writing and getting ideas for songs quite early on. At the time, when I was with my uncle, he didn't want me to, because occasionally I'll say, let's do one of my songs. And he's like, no one wants to hear that. They want to hear what they know. And so I kind of resigned to, okay, they don't want to hear that. But then later on thinking, hang on a minute, all the songs that they know at one point would have been a song that they didn't know. And they had to start somewhere, but so I started, and I remember when I was a really little kid, I had this idea for a song, and I don't know where I got it from, but it kind of went, all of my life I've been searching for a wife was the main lyric. And my mum used to get all of her mates around, and she'd go, Andrew, play that song you played me, sing it. And they'd be sitting behind me kind of giggling, because they're like, he's like 7 years old, talking about all of his life. I don't know where that came from, but I always liked making up ideas. And even my teacher, who taught me through the grades and the classical, I used to always, at the end of the lesson, I used to improvise around some of the little classical pieces. And she'd say, how are you doing that? And I couldn't believe she couldn't do it, because she was my hero. She was she had a degree in music, and she was watching me making up little tunes around the classical bits. And she was completely like, I don't know how you do that. And so, I always had ideas for melodies and stuff, and then started properly writing songs in my teen years. I
mean, I was listening to one earlier, Kathleen, which is your mother's name, but you wrote a sort of romantic song about a girl called Kathleen. And it's, if you were like 15 at that time, it's way past your years in a way.
Yeah, I wrote that song quite young. And it was an interesting song, because I'd written it, even though I was singing in the lyric, I'm singing about this girl was rich and I was coming from a poor family, and never the twain should meet. And it's kind of something that I experienced, but I experienced it in a different kind of way. And it was kind of like, I think when I was younger, I met this girl, she happened to be white, and her parents weren't cool with us hanging out. And I still didn't really understand what was going on. But then as I got older, I was like, well, maybe it was something to do with that, and it became part of the song. But I changed the whole context of the song, but that was really what inspired it. And I was really young, and that was one of the first songs that I wrote that ended up getting me a record deal.
You were at school and having this other life, and also sort of, I presume you must have known that you didn't want to do the things that most of the things that you were doing at school if it wasn't music. So how did you deal with that? Were you unhappy at school? Were you like not bothering?
Yeah, I got in trouble a lot for that. I mean, my school reports were like, he's a smart guy, but he needs to apply himself more. And then in the end, by the time I got to like 15, my maths teacher, who happened to befriend my mum, was saying to my mum, get him to stop doing music for a year and do his exams. And then she really was going to stop music for a year. And luckily my mum was from a musical family, and the music is what bought the house we were living in. And so my mum knew the reality is that, of course, you can make a living if you're serious about it. And then years later, that same teacher got in touch with my mum and said, I'm so glad you didn't listen to me. I remember my physics teacher was picking on me and going, you think because you can play music, you're going to be a pop star. But let me tell you, it's tough out there. I can tell you, because I know people in the business. I know Elkie Brooks. And at the time, Elkie Brooks was like huge. I was like, well, that's a bad example, because she's doing quite well. So
that's funny how people can take the air out of what you want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes
it's, did they really want to be a physics teacher in some school? Maybe that's not what they aspire to. You never know their story. I know that I didn't want to be, and I wasn't that kid that just wanted to be famous. It wasn't what was driving me at all. I actually wanted to write and make amazing music and play it to a crowd, a big crowd. But I wasn't just like, I want to be a pop star and music happened to be a vehicle. It wasn't that way around at all for me.
So how were you making demos at that stage?
Well, my mum bought me a thing called a Porter Studio. And it was like this little 4-track, I think it was a 4-track machine, but you could basically record 3 tracks or 2 and bounce them onto the other 2 and then overdub on, but it all was into cassette. And I was recording onto that. It was the best thing she ever bought for me because I was recording in my bedroom loads of songs that I ended up getting record deal for and everything. And it was all done on this little 4-track Porter Studio that I could take with me anywhere and just plug in. And it was, yeah.
Well, how did you get a record deal?
Well, actually, I first got noticed gigging with my uncle. We were gigging in a bar in North London, in Totteridge and Whetstone, somewhere around there. And this guy that worked at Island Records, it happened to be his local drinking spot. And he heard me and he said, "You sound great." He says, "Can you write songs?" And I was like, "Yeah, I've got a cassette." And I got him a cassette. And apparently that cassette just went for weeks around the music industry because that's what it was like. It was very incestuous. If there was a little buzz about someone, other labels wanted to get in on the act. And then all of a sudden I started getting a bit of interest from this tape that was going around. And it ended up on the desk at CBS. And at the time they had just signed a new guy called Terence Trent D'Arby. And he overheard the tape playing, one of my songs playing, and he was like, "Who's this?" And they were like, "Oh, there's this kid that we're thinking of, going to see him play a showcase or something." And he started saying, "This is amazing. This reminds me of Sly Stone, blah, 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 blah." And I think that helped me to get taken more seriously. And the other thing was that at the time, labels were going, "Well, yeah, his tape sounds okay, but can he play live?" But the thing for me was I was playing live since I was like 14, 15 years old. So that was really I thought that was a really weird question because it's like, everyone can play live. That's what I thought, And also I'd gone before that with a tape to a record label with my mum, but I got turned down because the guy said, "Who's playing the music on the tape?" And I said, "I am." And he didn't believe, and he thought it was a big scam, and he didn't believe I was playing on music. So we got kicked out of the office.
I mean, you were 16, weren't you? I think at this time you were.
Yeah, I was 16. I was about, because I just left school. I left school at 16 and I started at college. So I was about 17, doing a bunch of things at the time.
Was this also the time that you were in some sessions with the Clash?
Yeah, when I was 17, when I was at the music college, which was Kingsway College, Kingsway, Princeton, someone turned up and said, "There's a studio, they're looking for an in-house musician, young musician, for some projects, and someone recommended you." And so they said, "Come down to the studio for an audition." And I went to the studio and there was this guy sitting there. And I didn't know anything about the Clash. I didn't know that it was their studio because no one told me. And I wasn't really a punk fan. I wasn't at all at the time. So, and then there was a synthesizer sitting there. There was this guy called Faney, and he was running the studio, who became my like a lifetime mate after that. But he was like, I'd never played synthesizer. I was a pianist. And so I was looking at all the lights flashing and I got kind of overwhelmed, and they thought, this ain't the guy. But then they saw me another time playing somewhere and asked me back. And so I ended up working in the studio, and the Clash at the time were on tour in America with David Bowie. So I didn't see them for about 6 months. I just knew that it was their studio. And then one day, all this equipment started turning up, and I'll never forget, because I didn't even know about Road Crew at the time, and it was the Clash's equipment and loads of identical guitars and identical bass guitars at the same. And I was like, this is crazy. And I was like, and they've got people to tune their instruments. and then one day in walks Joe Strummer, and they started rehearsing there for their last album, which was called Cut the Crap, and writing. And he heard some of my stuff, and he was really supportive of me, big time. I mean, I saw him years after that at Glastonbury, and he said that he had recordings of me and him and some of the guys in the band jamming, and he had it on this 2-track machine, this 2-inch 8-track machine, and then sadly after that, I was supposed to hook up with him again, and he died. But yeah, I had an interesting time with the Clash, and it influenced me musically a lot.
What do you think? I mean, they had a really clear perception about how they wanted to sound in a studio. You know, they wanted this sort of really authentic live sound. What do you think you gleaned from them? Because, you know, at a young age, at 17, you're taking in all these influences all the time. And I just
Yeah.
wondered if there was something that you can sort of point to and say, that's what I got from them.
I think it was the live attitude, you know. I love the rock and roll attitude. You know, they weren't the best musicians on the planet, but they played with an intent. And Joe Strummer was like I was, you know, he was so passionate. He was so passionate. He was invested in every note and everything that he did, every word. And I just really had a lot of time for that. And I went on tour once. They went on tour. We went on the tour bus for a couple of dates with them, and just that I thought, yeah, I could get into this life. I think I'm built for being on the road. Not everyone is, but I knew I was.
What do you think you give people today? If a
Oh,
younger musician came in contact with you, what do you think you transpose? Is it the same, this
I'd
feeling?
like to think so. I'd like to think so. I like to think that it's that, you know, the passion. You know, it's all right being all pseudo about it and aren't I clever because I can do this and I can play with this hand and that, but real passion for the music you're doing, passion for the songs and the performance is everything. Because number one, that's what gives you staying power in a business that can be fickle at times. You know, you're going to go through the roller coaster, and if you're not really driven by a passion for what you're doing, you won't last the course. You really won't. And for me, that's what it is.
I mean, you got a 7 album deal, didn't you? I think.
Yeah. I think at the time I didn't even know, I really didn't understand the significance, you know, that you got a major label giving you a 7 album deal. I just wanted to be able to get into a big studio, and record my demos properly with the band that I was working with at the time, the guys I was working with. I was just excited about being able to get into a studio and also getting the equipment at home because I used quite crude equipment to record the original demos. And now I was able to get the drum machine I wanted to get, the synthesizer I wanted to get. And I was kind of like, you know, when you're a kid, when you're a teenager, you walk past a music shop and you're salivating, going, oh, I wish I could get that and have that speaker. And the main thing about getting a record deal was that I had that freedom. Now I could really invest my time completely and immerse myself into music.
Yeah, and I think that's the interesting thing because whenever you get something you want in life, everyone, I think everyone has it. It's in a sense, it's a naivety of thinking that those people are on your side with everything that you want. And
Yeah.
it's not always true, is it? And it wasn't true for you.
No, I mean, you know, getting into the music business was a learning curve in a big way because I had no idea about a lot of things, you know. And of course, the music business, the clue is in the term business, the word business. Uh, but it's a wake up call because you meet people who have a different agenda, and not always a background. Some of them did have background in music, but a lot of them didn't. Either they're coming from law or they're coming from marketing, and it's a very different kind of hat, you know. And being signed to a major label as well, they've got less time for the intricacies of a musician. Like I want to be a musician as well, and they haven't really got time for that. They want you to look good and yeah, be a pop star basically, because that's how they publicize and promote. It's about promotion, and that's where the emphasis is. And so I had to strike that balance. I had to deal with that. I had to learn how to navigate that.
Was there a moment where you thought, I'm not really aligned with what they want and what I want?
Definitely, there were there were certain things in the music business that I just didn't have time for. The whole fickleness about if you've got a song at the time, a song in the top 5 or the top 10, everyone seems to want to know your name, and then if something falls out, doesn't want to, having said that, I was very lucky because I had definitely a few real friends at the label. But there was those games where the guy at the top might not even pretend to notice you get in the lift and not looking at you and all that kind of hierarchy stuff that I just thought it's really silly because we're all trying to do the same thing here. We're all trying to move forwards, and I didn't quite understand that. And the fact that they didn't really like me playing keyboards. They wanted me to be this guy standing up singer because they didn't know how to market a musician. It's always a bit more thought that it takes to be someone like an Elton John or something, or Alicia Keys. But I think if that's what you are, they should employ the people that know how to market that.
And in America, they didn't want a black guy with a guitar, did they? And more of that story coming up in a moment. Just time for me to ask you to like, subscribe, and comment on these interviews. And please look out for others at popthehistorymakers.com. Okay, back to the interview with Andrew Roachford.
Yeah, they told me very straight. I was literally sat down and told, listen, as long as you insist on keeping that guitar in your music, we love you as an artist, but we have a problem with that. Mainly because they didn't, again, you have to think about it. And the way that the society was so segregated, especially in America, it was kind of straddling worlds, and you don't really do that. You either belong to one or the other, which is not something that I felt comfortable to do. If I get a song idea, I listen to a whole lot of black musicians, but also I listen to Kate Bush, and I loved T-Rex and Thin Lizzy and the whole, and it all sounded like music to me. It sounded like music, and if it touched me and moved me, then it starts to influence you, whether you know it or not. It's going in. But I realized that the music business is about marketing more than it is about music. And the thing about marketing is having your niche and sticking to your niche. And I think that's where labels, especially in America, struggled with me because I was just moving around the niches. And nowadays it's fine. Like a lot of the artists now, maybe Ed Sheeran and all these people, that their music is that. It's moving and it's allowed and it's not frowned upon because musicians like me kept pushing those boundaries.
Yeah, and in Britain, it was already changing, wasn't it? In that sense, it wasn't as segregated as in America in terms of what you, according to the record company, had to be. You mentioned the Clash and the reggae influences in the Clash, and these influences were in the music generally in Britain. I met you around Cuddly Toy. Mm-hmm. How did that track come about? Because it wasn't actually on the album at the start, was it?
No, it wasn't on the album. We finished recording the album, and we actually had it. The album was already packaged and ready to go. And then we were touring around the universities and the polytechnics. I used to call us the polyfillers. I thought that was funny at the time, but there we go. I just thought, and there was a song that I'd started on my Porter studio, which was Cuddly Toy, and it was actually quite electronic. And I thought, I need a song. And at the time I was listening to James Brown a lot and Little Richard. And I need a song for the live set that we could jam out a bit longer. It wasn't just, here's the song, verse, chorus, it's something we could jam. And then I brought it to the band and they started to play it and it grew. It just kept growing as a song. We were playing it at gigs and the record company were like, what is this song that you keep playing at the end of the gig that we haven't got on the album? And I was like, oh, this is just for the live thing, and they were like, no, you need to record it. And I was just like, well, the album's already finished. And they're like, we'll take it out of the shop. They were that sure about it. And so we recorded it. And then, of course, there was a bit of an argument with the label because the then head of A&R guy went, "You can't be seriously thinking of calling it Cuddly Toy," because I mentioned that in the verse, and I was like, "Yeah, that's the whole idea." Because when we did the song live, it was a kind of in joke with the band, and we knew what it was about, and it was an in joke, and I thought if you take the tongue in cheek element out of it, then it doesn't really make sense in my mind, and so I stuck to my guns. And it was allowed to be called Cuddly Toy. In America, they really didn't get that. They were like, "You need to call it Feel For Me Baby" in brackets. And I was like, "Really?" They were like, "Yeah, when George Michael came over here with Careless Whisper, we made him call it Guilty Feet Ain't Got No Rhythm in brackets." So, So I was like, okay then.
I mean, that track exploded. I mean, it was so energetic. It was original. It had everything, and it was just an amazing track. And I remember on MTV, it was just played to death. It's one of those ones that was permanently on rotation. And it was a massive success. You mentioned that things, for you changed with I don't know what word you used, but when it may have been success just now. What changed? How did people deal with you? How did you change, or did you?
You know what? Yeah, back in the day, you had shows like Top of the Pops and stuff, which everyone watched. It wasn't like now where it's online; it's so sort of spread out. And but back then, if you went on Top of the Pops a couple of times, as I did, and then walk back into the supermarket and expect no one to be looking at you, then you're really naive. And the whole idea of the change within a couple of weeks, that it took me a while to kind of get my head around what had just happened, and yeah, that was a bit of a shock, all of a sudden, oh, I'm not Andrew, the musician, I'm part of Roachford, the pop star thing, and I was just like, okay. How did it change me? Well, I had a bunch of guys around me in the band that I can say we had our world within ourselves, so it stopped us. It definitely stopped me from being really affected, and because it's tough when you're younger. Everyone's telling you how amazing you are and how handsome and all these things, not for it to go to your head. I understand when I see some of the younger pop stars and they lose the plot a bit. I'm like, well, that's kind of normal. It would happen to anyone if you get put in that place. But in my band, we all take the mickey out of each other. So I didn't have that kind of thing. But and it was always about the music for me. But yes, all of a sudden, Cuddly Toy had sent everything in a different place. And was Cuddly Toy a true representation of the album? Maybe not. I've had success other places around the world, and most of my success around the world has been post Cuddly Toy. So if you go outside of the UK, a lot of people don't know Cuddly Toy, and so they perceive me in a very different way. They perceive me as an album artist and a guy that has many albums and who's a musician, and it's a very different. It's a weird thing because I play a festival in the UK and it is all of a sudden Cuddly Toy this, Cuddly Toy that. And really it's strange for people that know me, like I'm touring Mike and Mechanics and we go out to Europe and I say, people don't know Cuddly Toy here in Germany. They don't know it, and they're like, what? And they know me, but they don't know that song.
That's amazing. But I remember interviewing you and I was insecure. At the start on MTV, definitely. I was inexperienced.
And you were great too. Yeah. You had a great presence on TV.
Oh, really. Thank you. But compliments never work.
Yeah, no, it's true, man.
Thank you. No, I'll take that on board. But you definitely were uncomfortable in interview situations back then. And I don't know where that came from, whether it was because it wasn't really what you wanted to do and it was something that you had to do.
It's just adjusting to like growing up in the UK and adjusting to the British music media that could be quite brutal. When we put out the first album, the first review I ever read said, black guys trying to sound like white guys trying to sound like black guys, and it was the first thing I ever read. and then I had to get used to the fact that, you know, you have to be thick skinned. It's almost kind of similar to today's social media, where you're going to get people saying all kind. I mean, it's just, and most people think they're being funny, and I get it. I've probably done it myself, but I wasn't prepared for it. And also doing interviews, written interviews, you know, for like, I don't know, at the time there was Melody Maker and Sound, and then reading back the interview going, this is not what I said, it's not how I meant it. And I started to get a bit like weary of doing interviews, you know. And then when you do, like, when you're a young star and you go to all these shows, they want you to be a certain way. The B want you to behave a certain way because that's the kind of energy they want to portray, and it might not necessarily be who you are. So you feel like you're being a little bit slightly fake because you're trying to do a exaggerated version of yourself, you know. But now I'm just kind of, I'm in the skin I'm in, and I really love what I'm doing, and I like doing interviews with people like yourself who are generally interested in what maybe I have to say in my journey. And you know, it's not, you don't have to worry about the pop star thing anymore. I don't worry about that anymore. Very rarely anyway.
I mean, I don't know if I read it or I heard it, but these really, you know, like Billy Joel, Elton John, people were contacting you very early on. What did they want? Was it that they wanted to have your, like, corners? They wanted to have your musicality? What did they want?
Such a good question. Well, it differed. I mean, like the two names you named, in the case of Billy Joel, he invited me and Derek, my bass player, to, he was playing Wembley Arena. I got invited and we sat there, and before the show started, security guy came out and said, "Oh, Billy wants to meet you before the show." I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. Got into the dressing room and he's sitting there by the mirror and, you know, "Hi, how you doing?" Everything. And he's looking at me kind of like this big question mark. He said, "Who wrote Cuddly Toy?" And I said, "I did." He was like, "When you went to the chorus, why did you go to that chord?" And he started picking my brain about the chord that I went to in the chorus. And this is just before a show. And I said to him, "It felt good. I don't know, you know," which is probably not the answer he was looking for. I think he was looking for me to get all technical. And I went, "It felt good." And he went, okay. And then that was it. But in Elton's case, Elton said it was about the energy, and he liked to be around that energy and the fresh energy of a younger artist, and it was inspiring to him. Kathleen was his all-time favorite. He told me, he said that he would put that on in the car when he was feeling down to bring him back. And so yeah, Elton was just like a massive fan. And then when I put out my Permanent Shade of Blue album, he loved it so much that he bought loads of copies, and whether they liked it or not, all of his mates got that for Christmas, and he told me that. And yeah, so I was getting all of these artists that I grew up listening to getting in touch with me, and that was kind of mad, you know. That was kind of surreal. That was really surreal. Even Michael Jackson's people got in touch with me and said that he loves what I do. I remind him of Sly Stone, and I was like, I actually didn't even believe that it was, I thought it was prank call, and it was for real. Did
you later also meet people like Sly Stone, or you mentioned Al Green earlier?
You know, I wish, because now Sly's gone, so it's definitely not going to happen now, not in this lifetime anyway. I wish I met Sly. You know, I relate to him with his lyrics and what he stood for, the fact that his music was so eclectic. He was such an artist, and he didn't, you know, he just did what he felt, and his band was mixed. It was male, female, black, white, Hispanic, whatever. And at the time, it wasn't cool, and he just didn't care about being cool. He done his thing. I'd have loved to meet him, but I didn't. I wanted to meet Al Green, and I can still do that because he's still trudging around. And I met someone that was working with him, and she said, yeah, maybe like he's going to be so-and-so tomorrow. And then he was supposed to do an interview, and apparently he changed his mind a lot, and he changed his mind. He was on the motorway, and he changed his mind, and he was in a limo, and he actually said, I want to go back. And they kept driving. And he said, no, now. And he opened the door of the car so they would stop. So Al Green is very a man of his own thing. And so that's the reason why that whole thing the next day got cancelled and I didn't get to meet him. But I feel like I've connected to those people so closely through the music. I understand and feel what they're doing on such a level that in a way I don't really have to meet them. That's more the ego, but I feel like I've met them through their music. Sometimes you meet people, they say never meet your heroes because they turn out to not be the nicest people and blah, 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 blah. But Stevie Wonder, he had the energy around him that his music has. He's like a guru to me, He's not just a musician. He's like, he comes with this energy. He's really warm. I mean, he's a Tory and has this warm Taurian energy. And of course, being blind makes him that more tactile. So, you just feel his energy. But also I could feel that he is so 100% true to himself, and that's the best you can be.
The 1991 concert, I think it was called Summer Excess at Wembley Stadium. I think there was Debbie Harry, there was In Excess, which is why it's called the Summer Excess. And you played there at Wembley in front of a massive audience. How was that?
Oh, man, that was amazing, because you just think before, I mean, I think at that time I'd seen Live Aid and Wembley Stadium. It was just so daunting, but you think, well, we're going a bit earlier. Maybe there won't be a lot of people there. It was packed, and Elton John was in the audience. And I remember Elton John was sitting near some of the people from Sony by there, and he kept going, yeah, you got to get this guy out there more. And, and we killed it. And I still have people, I go all over the world. I've been in Australia only a few weeks ago, and people come up to me going, they were there. And it seems like one of those days that people never forget, because I get all the time still, people come up to me going, me and my partner were there, we were there. And I'm like, wow. And it was really special. And actually, Hutchins was a very lovely, all the band, lovely guys, and really made it special. And yeah, it's something I'll never forget.
You touched on Mike Rutherford earlier, Mike and the Mechanics, of course. How did that come about?
Quite randomly. I mean, I was doing a writing camp in Germany, and one of the guys working there was working with Mike. And at that time, because Mike basically had the Mechanics, and sadly, one of the guys passed away. This was a guy called Paul Young from a band called Sad Cafe. And the other singer, Paul Carrack, they'd kind of just gone their separate ways. And so Mike had put the Mechanics to bed, but had got started to get ideas again, and maybe bored being at home, because Genesis weren't touring either. And was asking this guy called Brian Rawlins, who he worked with and stuff, who would be the person to write these songs with and maybe sing them. And my name just came up as and I guess it's because I am in that place between the soul and the pop rock thing where Mechanics sat, and so then I was driving and I got a call from Mike's producer, Chris, saying, hey, Mike would like to meet you. So went down his house and expected it to be this really serious meeting. But Mike had his equipment set up and he had his acoustic, and he started playing me his ideas. And while he was playing, I'm just humming along. And he's like, oh, can I just record that on my phone or whatever? Yeah, cool. And he's like, where are you getting the melodies from? And I'm like, I'm just humming along to what you're playing. I think at that point, he kind of made up his mind that it was going to work. And as we were leaving his house, he took me out and he was like, yeah, so I know you're doing your Roachford thing and it's, it's going well as it was. And he said, but, Mechanics was coexisting with Genesis. And so we're used to, and Paul Carrack had his thing and Paul Young had Sad Cafe. So I'm used to straddling the whole band's thing like that. And I think this could work. And that's when I realized he was talking about something more permanent, because I at the time only thought I was brought in to write with him. It turns out, it's been how many years later, 12 years or something, and we're still doing it. We just finished the longest tour ever, and it's amazing.
How did you go about interpreting the songs that were already written, like The Living Years and things like that?
I mean, again, a lovely question, because you can imagine when you got to the earlier gigs, because it'd been a long hiatus for Mike and Mechanics, and there is Mike and Mechanics back on tour, and the hardcore fans must have been a bit weird for them, because instead of Paul Carrack, they got me sitting there about to sing The Living Years and Over My Shoulder, and luckily, a lot of those songs that Paul Carrack sang, like The Living Years, was kind of up my street. Paul Carrack's amazing singer. Some ways we're similar, in other ways we're very different, where we prioritize. And I thought, well, I can't imagine someone else being brought into Roachford to sing as a front man. But what you do is you make them your own. You make them your own. I still respected the general vibe of the songs, but I put my own energy into them. And years of performing live, I think people quickly started to realize that it wasn't a cover band. It wasn't people trying to sound like the old singers. This was a new thing. This was the new Mechanics. And because there was new material, a lot of material that I co-wrote with Mike, it was an ongoing thing, and people understood that. It was another chapter.
But in terms of the older thing, is it like lyrically? Do you have to also connect lyrically or emotionally? I just wondered, because if it's already established, I know you said, you're giving your feel and your take on it, but you have to find yourself in the song, I presume.
Well, this is where we come full circle, because Living Years, which was funny enough, it was in the charts the same time Cuddly Toy was, the same week in the top 4, and it kept us off the top, which is, so I hated the Mechanics at the time. But can you imagine a song like Living Years, which is about not being able to express your love with your father in particular, before it was too late and your father passed away. When a song is that amazing, it's not hard to put yourself in it. Not all of the Mechanic songs lyrically I could really get into, if I'm honest, but melodically it's where I'm driven anyway. And what people don't often realize is that in the melody there is a lyric in itself. And if you can tune into what the music is saying, it's not always literally about words, because there are certain things that music says that words can't reach anyway. You can't make into words. So I just tap into the music. And when I'm with the Mechanics, for the majority of the time I'm playing as well. I'm playing keys. So I'm so connected to the music.
Is it true you met Phil Collins with his trousers down?
Yeah. First time I met Phil Collins, literally had his trousers down. And no, it wasn't at a P. Diddy party, by the way.
I love Phil Collins. He's such a laugh.
This was at the Prince's Trust in Albert Hall. And there was a lot of artists, Eric Clapton was doing it, Tom Jones. And so there wasn't a lot of changing rooms. And so they thought, well, Andrew's with Mike, we'll bung him in, Mike and Phil. Because this was actually the last time I ever saw Phil performing live, before he took time out, And it was a small changing room. We were there, and he apologized. He had to get changed. It was just blokes, and he was talking to me. He said, "So how are you enjoying being with the Mechanics? You enjoying it?" And I was like, "Well, this is my first gig, so I'll let you know." And then I didn't see him again for like 10 years. And I recently, the last couple of tours we've done with Mike and Mechanics, Phil's son has been playing drums for us, and so Phil's been came to a couple of the gigs. And really connected. We really connected, and as in, he dropped me a message about how much he loves the shows, and I think he's the most amazing artist and a lovely guy. And what can you say about Phil?
Yeah, I'm going to ask you a question, because you brought it up with The Living Years about reconnecting with your father. Is your father still alive? Did you reconnect with him? My moment was on my father's deathbed, where he said, "I love you, I've always loved you." And I realized for me, that was the first time I remembered him saying that. And I said it to him, and it was the first time I said it. So it was an amazing moment, but it was
That's
just a
huge.
moment. Yeah.
That's huge. I never had that moment. I mean, I believe that my father was too wrapped in guilt, to be honest with you, and didn't really know how to navigate that. He didn't know what my feelings towards him was because, I might have been that angry person that felt rejected. I'm not, but he didn't know that. He didn't really know me. And I did spend a lot of time going, well, I have family, and because of my mum's brother moving to Sweden, I have a lot of family in Sweden. So, and I used to go there sometimes to work with other writers. And my father lives in Sweden. Sadly, my father passed away literally months ago. But I did make one phone call. I got his number from a relative, but it was odd because you make that phone call, but you have to understand, well, why am I making this phone call? What do I expect? And a lot of people think, well, it's your dad, and you need it. Well, what does that really mean? Okay, so DNA, I've got 50% of him and my mum, but what does it really mean? And I had my uncle around who was like a father figure. So when I did call him, it was kind of awkward because I didn't really know why I was calling him. And then when I spoke to him, I realized it's a complete stranger. And I think that was kind of it for me. It was like, okay, I satisfied my curiosity, and whatever I'm looking for from him, I need to find in me anyway. And that was that with that. He never had that chance to say I love you, but then he didn't really know me, so it wasn't that kind of thing. At least your dad, he knew who you were.
Yeah, but I think that's a brilliant way of looking at it. I mean, I think it was just words, to be honest, in my case. I don't think, people say a lot, but they don't do. And
Yes.
and for me, that's what it was. And I think for you, you got some form of closure in a way because you understood that it's about you within you, which is brilliant. I want to say because Mike Rutherford and Mike and the Mechanics, there's been an amazing, I sort of hate this word, but I'm going to say it, amazing journey for you to be on that. And it's also, you were in Australia recently with you. And it does seem like that your career in the way that you want it has really reached and is on a really great level now today. And I want to, at the end of this, I just want to thank you because I think it's important to say to artists who have contributed to the culture, thank you for that because you've been part of our lives. You've certainly been part of my life over the years. And I think it's a really important contribution. And, there's quite a few years to go, I hope, Andrew.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, wow, I'm touched. I don't know what to say. I mean, um, you know, like I always said to my old guitarists used to say, we don't do it for accolades, of course. I actually do feel like I serve music. That's my job in life. I'm a servant of music and of the people that want to hear it, and get something from it. I've heard so many times, even this last trip to Australia, a woman just put her arms around me and told me her story that she had just been diagnosed with breast cancer and how your music helps them through somehow. I remember Kylie Minogue would say that to my brother. There was a song that I wrote called "Ride the Storm," and she had just was getting through her journey through that word journey, but it is a journey. And this song "Ride the Storm" that I actually wrote for an ex to help her get through it, because I couldn't actually find another way. There's nothing I could say, but this song was a way that I could sort of put it out there. And so the pleasure that I get from it, when you hear people say that, you realize you're doing the right thing, even if it was just one person, but there's loads of people that go, I lost my son and didn't know how I was going to get through, and your music, and music's helped me a lot as well. I lost my brother 5 years ago, who was my best mate, my younger brother, through cancer. And we went into lockdown, and if it wasn't for music, it would have been very difficult. I mean, it was difficult for me, but it gave me something to focus on. And I think we all need, especially as we get older, we need to have a reason to exist, rather than just being here. And music's always given me that, And I just hope everyone can find it. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. It could it's normally your kids anyway. But yeah, music has been the reason why I'm here.
Wow. Well, that's brilliant. Thank you. It's really great to talk to you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you again after all this time, mate.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.